On October 2nd, 2012, the Tibet Fund and friends paid tribute to Lodi Gyaltsen Gyari at Le Cirque in New York City, hosted by Rinchen Darlo, president of the Tibet Fund, Richard Gere, Carrie Lowell of the Gere Foundation, and Richard Blum, chairman and founder of the American Himalayan Foundation.
My name is Sewon Namgyel, and I'm a Tibetan American. I serve on the board of the Tibet Fund. I'm also one of the beneficiaries of Tibet Fund. Why Tibet Fund is unique? Right off the bat, I can think of two things. One is the funds raised by Tibet Fund directly benefit the Tibetan people, especially in the area of economic development, education, and healthcare. So it empowers the Tibetan people who are the custodians of Tibetan culture. The second, I believe, is it's being a humanitarian organization is well positioned in the future if there's opportunities to work in Tibet, or also for projects for Tibetans in India or in exile, for anyone who wants to support, who want to really leverage their support in a big way and work with people who have real experience in and become a part of a game-changing movement to really take the Tibetan community to the next level. I think Tibet Fund is an excellent platform for that.
Lodi Gyari served His Holiness the Dalai Lama and the people of Tibet for more than 4 decades as an activist, a parliamentarian, a civil servant, and a cabinet minister. As the special envoy of His Holiness, Lodi led the long and arduous negotiations with the Chinese government to gain autonomy and democratic freedom for Tibet. His friends and colleagues came far and wide to be with Lodi and his family at this special and heartfelt event, generously supported by world-class chef Eric Ripé of Le Bernardin. Eric recruited 5 top chefs from New York City to create a magical 5-course meal.
Many years ago, when I was unhappy in my life, the Dalai Lama inspired me tremendously, and I learned from His Holiness about the struggle of Tibetan people in China, the struggle of the refugees outside Tibet, and it touched my heart. And until this day, of course, I'm an eternal beginner as a Buddhist, and His Holiness is a tremendous inspiration to me. And the people of Tibet are in need of help, and it's not only a pleasure, but I think it's a duty to help people inside Tibet and outside Tibet. And therefore, I'm here for Tibet Fund and to help as much as I can.
Mr. Eric Ripé, ladies and gentlemen, please give him a deep round of thanks, and Gaelic will give him a scarf. Eric Ripé is the best, ladies and gentlemen. If you haven't been to Le Bernardin, go. It's #1 in Zagat. If you don't know Le Bernardin, you're missing everything. Just go there, okay?
Thank you very much. Thank you so much. Thank you. Oh, I have to come over here. Thank you so much. You're welcome.
Guests chatted, and jazz musician Stanley Jordan serenaded the crowd of over 160 guests.
Lodi Gyari was witness when I was appointed to be the president of the Tibet Fund in 1987. He has not only watched the Tibet Fund grow from a single part-time staff member working on a desk provided by the Office of Tibet to one of the primary funding sources for programs and initiatives that give Tibetans enormous support in so many fields, but he has played a valuable part in its success. So I would like to thank him for helping us grow and be an asset to the Tibetans.
Richard Gere praised Lodi, and Gelek Rinpoche and the board of the Tibet Fund presented Lodi with an award and thanked him.
There are two people who, with this invasion of Tibet and their pain and suffering, really brought us extraordinary goods into our life that I can name right now. One, of course, is His Holiness the Dalai Lama, and everyone knows that. But Lodi Gyari is another one.
Rinpoche, on behalf of the board of the Tibet Fund, we have this plaque for you with the wind horse.
Thank you very much. Can you read? Thank you. Can you read?
I will read, if I can. It says, Kasur Lodi Gyari, in recognition of your tireless dedication and advocacy on behalf of the Tibetan people and your promotion of Tibetan-American friendship and understanding, October 2, 2012. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I always have, soft corner for the Tibetans. I'm particularly also honored that Gere Rinpoche, again, one of my closest, dear, old friend. I'm an old friend. I do not mean that we're getting old, but, I think I know him, you see, among those people who are in this room, for the longest period of time. So again, Rinpoche, thank you for coming here to be with us. It really is a special honor to me. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm really honored. I think about 4 or 5 months back, Rinpoche called me to convey the Tibet Fund's board's decision to honor me. I thought about it. First of all, I always believe that as a Tibetan, it is our moral responsibility to serve His Holiness and the Tibetan people. For that, we do not need to be honored, nor do we deserve to be honored. But then I felt this is a way that the Tibet Fund wants to honor not me, but our collective work that we have done for Tibet. And at that time also I told Rinpoche that by October I know that I will be the former special envoy. And that made it much easier for me also to agree to be honored. Because if I was still serving, I don't think I would have I mean, it's a great honor, but I would have politely declined. I must admit that I have, I think, one talent. That is that I have been, I think, quite talented and seeking help and guidance from wise people. This, I think, comes from my training background as a monk. The few years that I've spent as a young novice has been of profound influence in my life. If there's anything goodness in me, I think it is that. Unfortunately, it was disrupted, but the fact is that I had that opportunity. For example, whenever I go and seek guidance from my friends here in Washington or in Europe, I go in the same way that I was taught when I go to a master, a teacher, and with a deep reverence. And that really, I think, profoundly helped me. So I think there's one talent or wisdom is that I have always been fortunate and I have always gone to the right people to seek guidance. The other is, I think I have some talent and choosing the right people, right colleagues to work with. For example, tonight, I get, honored, to be very frank, for the work that others have done. I think some years back, one of our former Kaluntiba, a very dear friend, Sun Tomjela, whom some of you know, asked me, he said, sometimes some of the younger Tibetan officials come and ask his advice, especially with regard to international relations, how it needs to be conducted. And he said quite often he tells them, why don't you go and ask Lodi Gyari? Because somehow he had made some success. So as a result of that, one person did come to me, and I said, very simple. One is truly believing in the cause. Because if you don't believe in what you do, and whatever in your profession, we know that it's not going to be successful because your heart is not there. So the most important is passionately believing in the cause that you're fighting for. The other is being smart enough to have friends, colleagues who are much smarter than you. I tell you, sometimes it is quite problematic to have a lot of smart people working for you or working with you. They make your life difficult. When you try to tell them something to do, they tell you something totally different. But this has been, I think, one gift that I had. And my friend, a colleague, and the president of the Tibet Fund is, I think, one good example. He has been very kind to, again, kind of, exaggerate, my role with the Tibet Fund. But yes, I did have some role, no doubt, in the beginning. But I think one of the most important roles that I played is always encouraging Rinchen. In fact, there was a time that he, thought that he has done enough. He really wanted to step aside. I did, both taking advantage of my personal friendship, but also invoking the importance of Tibet, our cause, our people. I've been able to continue to encourage him to stay and lead the Tibet fund. I did it not because, in fact, it is burden not to do a favor to a friend, but because I care about Tibet, and I knew what wonderful work he has done. Yes, as he had mentioned in 1987, when I was in the Tibetan cabinet as the Minister for International Relations, I came over to New York to oversee the transfer from my another good friend, Tenzin Tatung, to Rinchen Dalo. And so therefore I know, what Tibet Fund was at that time. I think they had about over 200,000. In those days it was quite big money, which was mainly the money that was left by Geshe Kasa Chenchi Sirve. So Geshe Wangel, yes. Kalmuk Mongol, many of you know, and I think Bob Thurman is here, their teacher. Left, I think, some kind of house, I can't remember in His Holiness' name, that was sold. And so there was about, I think, over 200,000. In those days, it was big money. That was the seed money for the Tibet Fund. Then there was some other contribution of 30 or 40,000. So anyway, it was much less than 300,000. That's how, Rinchen, started. The Tibet Fund, and I need not say where it has reached today. Now, did he do it single-handedly? Certainly not. He has also been fortunate enough to have a very dedicated staff, but more importantly, a board that really takes tremendous interest, headed by my friend Mickey. So therefore, I actually wanted to today pay my respect and tribute to the work that Tibet Fund has done, and the Tibet Fund's board, and especially, Rinchen Dalo.
One of the many highlights during this heartfelt event was the arrival of leader Nancy Pelosi, who came with her entourage from Washington, D.C. that evening during a very busy time to personally applaud Lodi and congratulate him.
Probably noticed we've been joined by Democratic leader Nancy Pelosi. When I just asked her if she was ready to go to work, she said, I was in the air for 3 hours trying to get here. In 1991, I was making a movie about His Holiness, the Dalai Lama, called Compassion in Exile. And in 1991, he was, for the first time, invited to address the Congress of the United States. And we were filming there. It was in the rotunda, under the dome of the Capitol. And there was the representatives and the senators and ambassadors and distinguished guests. And when His Holiness came into the room, into this huge rotunda, the silence echoed in the dome. And it was very solemn. And we filmed all this, him coming in and the solemnness of the occasion. And when he saw Representative Nancy Pelosi, he broke into this huge smile, stopped walking toward the podium, went over to her. They had an incredibly warm greeting, and the entire place erupted into a huge standing ovation. And it's a testament to how long Democratic leader Pelosi has been an incredible supporter of Tibet, the Tibetan cause, and His Holiness. It's been decades. She's been a leader in every possible way. And I can tell you, there's not that large a Tibetan constituency in her district. This is not the motivation. She's been an incredible leader in the Congress, and we are honored tonight to have her here. And when she heard we were honoring Lodi Gyari, she cleared her schedule, spent 3 hours in the air circling to be here. Please welcome Democratic leader Nancy Pelosi.
Thank you very much, Mickey, for that nice remembrance of that very happy day for us all. I think it's a little presumptuous for me to speak following the special address you all received from Lodi Gyari, and which I received in the car by way of email every step of the way. So I will just confine my remarks to making a toast to Lodi. I want to do so in the presence. I'm so honored to be here with my colleague, Congresswoman Nita Lowey, who holds the purse strings. Carried on the work. We worked together on the committee on many of the initiatives for Tibet, and now as the senior Democrat on the committee, she continues our bipartisan work there. First met His Holiness under the auspices of Tom Lantos, the head of the Human Rights Commission in the Congress, and that was 1988, and so it's been a long relationship. But the connection for all of us to His Holiness has always been Lodi Gyari, and so it's my honor honor to be here with his friend Richard Gere, who has been also a thread that has connected us all. And Mickey, thank you so much for your leadership as well. I just want to make the following observations. I know much has been said about Lodi's persuasiveness and how he represents His Holiness with such dignity. And this is a long toast, I know, but anyway. It's about Lodi, right, Richard? I can talk longer. But I think it's really important to know for us in the Congress, because this is always bipartisan. That occasion Mickey referenced, Senator Mitchell and I hosted it, but it was bipartisan reception for His Holiness. And when we were able to give His Holiness the Congressional Gold Medal, we were honored that President George W. Bush came to be there, much to the dismay of the Chinese government. So this has been bipartisan. And that's a tribute. And that's a tribute to Lodi, because we all know how brilliant he is. We all know how respected he is and the rest. And there's more than one reason for that, and one of them is a very special demeanor. And as I listened to him this evening and heard his remarks on the way over, I realized that he, of course, has learned all of that from His Holiness, and that's a very special thing. I want to tell you one lesson that I learned from His Holiness. We were in Dar es Salaam. We were there in India visiting, as Lodi referenced, and all of these people were coming over the mountain. It was right at the time when the 2008 March, they said that we planned our trip. Well, we planned our trip like 6 months in advance, but we didn't know that they would have the crackdown, and the Tibetans were coming over the mountains and telling us these horrible stories about what was going on in prisons there and how they were treating people in Tibet. And it was a horrible, it was the most emotional thing for our very strong bipartisan delegation to hear. So when we then had lunch with the other lamas whom His Holiness had invited to meet with us, who came from all over, you remember this, Lodi? And we were all getting up and saying how we were going to help, whether it was with visas and how we were going to help with scholarships and how we were going to help with this. And I was making my remarks about how we were going to make sure the world knew what was happening in Tibet, and it was a challenge to the conscience of the world, and we couldn't let the Chinese government just get away with this because they were a strong economic power. When I was finished, His Holiness turned to me and said, not to me, to the whole room, Madam Speaker, the Speaker of the time, we must rid you of your negative attitudes. I told Richard that story, and so we've all been blessed by elevating our enthusiasm to a higher level of virtue, none more than Lodi Gyari. And I'm here to say thank you to him on behalf of all of my colleagues, Democrats and Republicans, House and Senate, who respect him so highly.
During the cocktail party, while guests admired the auction items and listened to Tibetan musicians sing traditional Tibetan songs, we asked guests to tell us why the Tibet Fund is so important to the people of Tibet.
I think the role of the Tibet Fund has been unparalleled, I think I can say. I'm not saying it because I was once a board member, but we must understand the real Tibet, in terms of culture, in terms of identity, lives outside of Tibet, unfortunately, in places like India, Nepal, etc. But you cannot also preserve such a unique and distinctive culture without help. So the role of the Tibet Fund in providing the crucial support and preservation of Tibet's unique and very distinctive character has been extraordinary. And as we all know that the United States Congress, which has been very generous, has also given the task to the Tibet Fund to be the vehicle, for example, for funding many of the projects. But besides helping preserve the Tibetan identity outside of Tibet, Tibet Fund has also been very active in helping the Tibetan refugees who continue to come out of Tibet. People of all ages, and people of all background, including some very little, boys and girls who just risk their life barefoot, crossing the Himalayas to come out, and in many cases to be able to have an opportunity to study, or in cases of some elderly people, just to have a glimpse of His Holiness. So, in all these crucial sectors, the role of the Tibet Fund has been extraordinary. So, in fact, I feel, kind of honored to have a relation with the Tibet Fund.
The Tibet Fund for approximately 16 years. I have the great honor of chairing the board for that period, and I do it because I love the Tibet Fund. I love that 94% of all the money that we raise goes directly to Tibetans. I feel that's amazing for a charity or a foundation at this point, where others charge 25-30% overhead, we charge 6%. I love the projects that we do. I love the fact that from the moment a refugee arrives in India or Nepal, having climbed over 20,000-foot icy Himalayan passes, they're greeted by the reception center that Tibet Fund funded. They go to medical clinics that Tibet Fund funded. They're given housing and food, clothing that Tibet Fund funds. The children are sent to schools that Tibet Fund funds. The older children are sent to vocational schools Tibet Fund funds. The nuns and monks go to monasteries and nunneries that we help fund. There's old age homes. There's an amazing scholarship fund that most of the people in the government today have gone through.
The Tibet Fund was founded in 1981 with the blessing and guidance of His Holiness the Dalai Lama to help Tibetan refugees rebuild their lives, sustain their settlement communities in India, Nepal, and Bhutan, and preserve the Tibetan way of life, language, and national identity. The Tibet Fund has become the leading funding organization for education, healthcare, refugee rehabilitation, community and economic development, and religious and cultural programs that promote self-reliance and build capacity of the exile community. On the behalf of Tibetans everywhere, thank you for your support and friendship.